What are the zeros of a graph? What are relative minima and maxima? What are extrema? Are any of those even different from each other, or are they all the same thing? Well, here's the answer to all of those questions in just one video. Alright, here's our first example. We need to estimate the zeros and relative maxima and minima of this graph. What do any of those mean? Well, first let's talk about zeros. Zeros are the x values where y is equal to 0. I know that's kind of confusing, but basically the way we can figure that out is where it crosses the x-axis, this left and right line here. Because see, this is x and this is y. So for example, this would be a 0, this would be a 0, and this would be a 0. These are all places where it crosses the x-axis. The reason why that we have to figure out where it crosses the x-axis is because the x-axis is where y is 0. It hasn't gone anywhere up or down. So to find the zeros, we just need to figure out what the x values are of each of these points. And they're probably not going to be exact, partially because I drew this graph pretty terribly, but also it says to estimate the zeros. So we don't need to find the exact amount, just kind of where it's close to. So let's look at this one first. How far to the left or right do we have to go to get to this point? Well, if we start in the middle, you have to go to the left 1, 2, 3 to get to this. And remember, as you go to the left, the numbers get smaller. If you were to go to the right, the numbers would get bigger. So this would be -3 because we started at 0 and went down 3. Now, what about this point here? This one, you need to go to the left 1. So in this case, -1 would be another 0. And this one all the way over here, we're going to have to go to the right. So it's going to be a positive number. So we have to start in the middle and go 1, 2, 3 to the right. So that's going to be +3. So there you go. Those are our 3 zeros. And remember that these are estimates. I mean, they're pretty close, but some of them, the line doesn't quite exactly hit that number, but it's pretty close. So these are our estimates. All right, now we need to figure out the relative maxima and minima. Well, first of all, let's clear up something in case you were confused. Maxima and minima are just the plurals for maximum and minimum, which are probably words that you've heard before. Remember, minimum is the smallest amount, and maximum is the biggest amount. So maxima is just multiple maximums. Yeah, that's the plural form. Now, what are relative maxima and minima? What does this word mean? Well, the opposite of a relative maximum or minimum is an absolute maximum or minimum. An absolute is basically the highest number that you can get for y in the entire graph. In this case, what is that? Well, I mean, this goes up infinitely. So there is no absolute maximum. It's just going to go to infinity. But a relative maximum is basically the highest point on like a hill of the graph. In this case, we do have a hill of the graph right here, see? So the relative maximum would be right here. And it is possible to have multiple relative maxima. That's why we have the plural form here, because you can have a bunch of hills on the same graph. And relative minima are basically just the opposite of that. It's the lowest points in these like valleys here, right? So here's one right here. Now, I did talk about some other words that you might see. For example, the word extrema. Extrema are literally the same thing. Extrema are just relative minima and maxima. And occasionally you might also see the term turning points. Those also mean the same thing because turning points are basically where the graph changes direction. So let's see, it's going up, and now it's going down. So this is a turning point. So we've found our relative maxima and minima right here, right? Here are the two of them. But we need to tell the coordinates of these. It doesn't help to just circle it. So let's find the maxima first. Here's our maximum, and we'll call it a maximum because we only have one of them. Maxima would be multiple maximums. So we need to figure out the coordinates of this, and remember, we're estimating. So this is not exactly on a coordinate, but we'll just pick out the nearest one. So the nearest one is this one right here. So when you write coordinates, you have to do x first and then y. So x is left and right. So we start in the middle and we have to go left 1, 2 to line up with this point. And left is negative numbers. So our x is going to be -2. And now we have to figure out how high up we have to go. We have to go up 1, 2, 3. And that's positive because as you go up, the numbers go up. So 1, 2, 3, we have to put 3 for y. So we found our maximum. Our relative maximum is -2, 3. But now let's find our minimum. That seems to be right around this point. And to get to this point, we have to go to the right 1. The right is positive numbers, so that's going to be a 1. And now we need to figure out y. Well, in this case, we're not going up, we're actually going down. So we're going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. When you go down, those numbers are negative. So this is going to be -4 for y. So there you go. This is our answer. We have found the zeros and then the maximum and minimum for this problem. Here's another example, and yes, this is a very weird looking graph, but go ahead and pause the video, see if you can find the zeros and relative maxima and minima, and then unpause and see if you got it right. All right, so first let's look for zeros. And remember, zeros is where it crosses this x-axis, the left and right line here. Whenever it crosses that, that is a zero. And in this case, that's actually going to make our lives easier because we only have one of them, and it's right here. This is the only place where it crosses this line. So now we need to figure out what the x value is of this point. How far left or right do we have to go? Well, not at all. We just stay here, which means that our zero is going to be 0. Now we need to find the relative maxima and minima. Remember, those are the hills and valleys of our graph. And as you can see, we have more of them than last time. So this time I'm going to write maxima because we have multiple of them, because that's plural. So where do we see the tips of hills on our graph? Well, I see one right here, and I see one right here. These are the two hills of our graph. So we need to figure out the points of these, or at least estimate them. We have one like right about here. So x is going to be how far left or right we have to go. So to get to this point, we have to go left 1, 2, 3, 4. And left is all of our negative numbers. So our x is going to be -4. And now we have to figure out y. How far up or down do we have to go? Well, we have to go down 1, 2. So that's going to be -2. So in the last problem, that would mean that we're done. But in this case, we actually have another hill over here. So this is also going to become a maximum, a relative maximum. So we have to go to the right 1, 2 to get to it. The right is positive numbers. So this is going to be 2 for x. And we have to go up 1, 2, 3. And up is positive numbers as well. So that's going to be 3 for y. So we found our two relative maxima, but now we have to find our minima. So where can we find our minima? Remember that minima are valleys, these bottoms of valleys here, like this one, and this one right here as well. So let's figure out the coordinates of these. This one is right about here, and to get to here, we have to go to the left 1, 2 to be lined up with it. So our x in this case is going to be -2. But now we have to figure out y. That's up and down. We have to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's going to be negative because down is negative. So we have to go down 5, -5. And now finally this one, this is right about here. We have to go to the right 1, 2, 3. To the right is positive numbers. So that's going to be 3 for x. And then we have to figure out y. Y is up and down. So we have to go up 1. 1 up is positive numbers. So our y is going to be 1. So there you go. We have found our 0, which is 0, and we found our 2 maxima and 2 minima. So there we go. So now you know how to find zeros and extrema / turning points / relative maxima / minima. Once you've got that down, you normally after this learn how to graph a confusing graph that seems to stump a lot of people in algebra, which are piecewise functions. So if you want to learn how to do those so that you're not confused when it comes to that lesson, then you can watch this video right here. And as always, if you're confused about anything in this video, then go ahead and leave a comment about it, and I'll be sure to answer your question. Thanks for watching.